My name is JCharron. I'm a Staff Sergeant in the United States Air Force. Today I would like to talk to you about something that is becoming ever more relevant in today's society: cultural awareness. And to do that today, I would like to tell you about an experience I had on my last deployment, where I was assigned to a Lithuanian army camp in the middle of nowhere, Afghanistan. So with that, have you ever heard the term fish out of water? Imagine yourself put into a situation where you have no idea of another culture's identity, what they do for their practices, how they live their day-to-day life, and what their preferences are. In addition to that, the only way to avoid isolation is now to communicate with this new, unique culture that you've never experienced before. On my last deployment to Afghanistan, this is exactly what had happened to me. There was a lot of thought put into it before I left on my assignment. Then I also had to experience something that almost every person has in this type of situation: culture shock. And finally, I had to overcome what was happening to me in my mind while I was in this unique situation. It is safe to say I had a lot to think about before I actually embarked on my mission. Some of the things I thought about was the language, first and foremost. Would they be able to speak English? Would they have a translator? Would they expect me to speak Lithuanian or Russian? I assumed that Lithuanians would speak Russian due to their proximity to Russia and being a former state of the USSR. Another thing I worried about was if that they do speak English, if my terrible accent would hinder my ability to effectively communicate with them. And then I thought, well, maybe they're in the same boat as me. Are they going to expect me to speak Lithuanian? Are they going to hope that I bring a translator to speak to them? My next thought, also on communication, fell to the fact that, am I going to be able to communicate with my home unit in Kandahar? Or will I be stuck there with the Lithuanians and have no way of communicating to my unit of assignment? After I panicked myself with that, I also thought about, am I going to be able to communicate with my family? Will there be Wi-Fi? Will I have a way to actually contact them in case there's an emergency, or if they need to get a hold of me for something? It was a great worry for myself, and something I was unsure of how I would be able to do until I actually arrived at my station. Naturally, my next thought fell on food. How would I eat? Would the Lithuanians eat typical American food, or would they have more of their cultural food at the installation? And now many American communities are diverse enough to have the ability to experience many cultural different foods. So now I'm not afraid to try anything new. However, after eating a certain culture's food for a lengthy period of time, I am going to start going crazy for anything that might look like a hamburger. And I love my hamburgers. Next, I worried about my living conditions. How would they be? Would I have similar living conditions to what I had experienced at my home station or my previous deployments? Would I be sharing a room with Lithuanians or other members of my team? What was the shower situation like? The bathrooms. Now, I have no qualm or issue with going to the bathroom in a porta-john for several months. I've done it before. It's just part of reality and part of life in a deployment. What about the laundry? I like to have fresh uniforms, fresh clothes. I don't like to stink. Working outside on a flight line all day and in the heat, you can get pretty stinky pretty fast, so I expected there to be at least a laundry service or a laundry room where I could perform laundry. And finally, I worried about the Lithuanians and the lifestyle they had there. What was their life like? What about recreational activities? What do they do in their day-to-day life? What was their hierarchy like in their military? Would it be similar to ours or vastly different? And what about religion, family, country? How do those factor into their lifestyle? And of course, as every military member talks about while they're away from home, is what is their home life like? Would they be accepting of U.S. forces? Because as my experience shows, that many countries and nationalities outside of the U.S. do not really accept U.S. forces, mainly based on experiences with previous U.S. forces where they were rude or arrogant and treated their host nations like crap. Excuse my language. But once I arrived at the station, I experienced, like I said before, what anybody would experience is a culture shock. Not everything was as I had expected it to be. The first thing I noticed was that when I stepped off the helicopter I was greeted with a smile and in English by one of the Lithuanian officers. That was a big relief for them to be able to speak English to me. And I actually found out that it was a requirement for their officer corps to make captain that they were just passed an English speaking test, an English writing test as well. English was spoken very well amongst most of their ranks, including the enlisted force. And several of them were actually very well spoken in Dari too, so they could speak with the local nationals that were assisting in the shutdown of the base that we were performing. My communication with the outside world was limited, extremely limited, I have to say, to a local phone that I received right before I left on my assignment. I was working on a old T-Mobile similar device, touch tone, text tone, green screen, very limited. I also found out that I would be unable to contact my family for my duration while I was at the Lithuanian installation. The Wi-Fi that they had was slow and taken down just a week before we had arrived on station, they said. So I was effectively cut off from my family for several months while I was there. The food was pretty outstanding, much better than any other food I had on any other deployments in my previous experiences. The only problem with that was with quality came in a lack of quantity due to the size of the base and the fact that the base was beginning to shut down and we needed to limit the supplies and resources going into the base, as well as the increasing danger of roadside attacks due to the fact that the locals knew that we were pulling out of the area. The quarters were actually comparable to quarters I've had on previous deployments, where I was assigned with myself and my other teammates in the same room. We're lucky enough to have one room to ourselves, all three of us. A little bit more cramped than I'm used to. Being in the Air Force, we are privileged and usually tend to get lucky to have just one other roommate on a deployment. I consider that a great advantage over our sister services. The one thing I couldn't help but notice, though, was the location of our room. It happened to be right along the perimeter wall. The base itself was not very large to begin with, and it's just something that we would have to deal with while we were there. You could literally throw rocks at the village. We were right on the perimeter wall there. One of the biggest differences that I noticed on my first day, and actually within the first 5 minutes, was, as you could assume, stepping off a long helicopter ride. First thing I needed to do after greeting everybody was go to the bathroom. There were 2 bathrooms on the installation, one of them being co-ed, and that's the one I happened to walk into. It was rather strange and different to use a bathroom with a few females in it while I was in there. Something I would not really get used to. They also have a very strict blackout policy due to the location and the isolation of the installation. So at night, once the sun went down, all lights, outside lights, had to be blacked out, turned off. All windows were painted over, and if you were using a light inside, it would need to be red. That is a low frequency light. It's harder to see at distances, so they recommended using red during that time, if at all were needed. Their lifestyle was pretty good for being where we were. I played lots of basketball. Turned out it is their favorite sport. They love playing it, they love watching it, they love talking about it. They also had a social night every once a week, where instead of going to the chow hall or just doing normal activities, they would all get together in their recreational room, put on a big feast, have poker, card games, play pool, play their favorite indoor game, foosball. They are very good at it. We could never beat them at that. Their work style was very slow compared to normal American work style. It's very laid back, very talk now, work later, and we discovered why, and I'll talk about that in my next part of my speech. And their military life was very much different from American military life, where their units acted more as brother to brother rather than superior to subordinate. They were all a tight-knit family organization rather than a military organization. And I thought that was rather unique. So, after several days, I gained a firm grasp on my reality that I had to experience while with the Lithuanians, and soon I was able to put together how to deal with my life day to day while I was there. The language barrier turned out to be not so difficult. After all, they all spoke English. I did have to have one of their officers translate a few of my emails due to the fact that all their computers were in Russian. He would write my emails for me as I spoke them to his leadership, and they would send it to my leadership. Unfortunately, that was the only way I could communicate with my chain of command. I did finally get a chance to get a hold of my family through a strange coincidence, where a friend of mine from high school was also in Afghanistan as a loadmaster on a C-130. One of the C-130s that came in to start lifting cargo out of our area. Turned out the loadmaster was my friend's roommate, and she delivered a message to her to deliver a message to my girlfriend, who then delivered a message to my family. But unfortunately, that was the only time I was able to contact them. We dealt with the limited amount of food. We enjoyed the quality that was there. We ate higher calorie foods that were available to us. We also discovered a large shipment of MREs that came in due to the closure of the base, and the logistics officer told us there wasn't enough food to make it for another month, so we enjoyed the food and the MREs when we get a little bit hungrier. The quarters we grew accustomed to. They were a little bit smaller, but there's still room nonetheless, and we managed. After my day one bathroom incident, I did my best, and I think only entered the co-ed facilities once or twice after that encounter. To stay more in the male-only facilities, and that was to avoid any confrontation and to save face for the U.S. military, as to not impose any threats on their lifestyles or get the wrong impression. As for the work cycle, it became necessary to become a jack of all trades, master of none. All of their work styles were shared concepts, and the reason they had a slower work pace was the limited number of out-of-work activities they had available to them on the installation. So if we worked too hard and worked too fast, they would have nothing to do the next day, and nothing to do the next day would leave nothing to do for the rest of the week. So therefore, a slow work pace was almost mandatory for them. The social nights proved to be very effective at getting to know everybody, playing poker with them, playing foosball with them, and still losing every day. There were also a lot of basketball games between us and the Lithuanians, so we would play 3-on-3, Americans versus Lithuanians, because it was their favorite sport. And they would also want to talk to us about our favorite basketball teams, and I myself am not a huge basketball fan, so I just told them, being from New England, I do support the Celtics. They just laughed at that, of course. It was also not long, probably within a week or two, that we were accepted as part of their family, their military family, and not just as the Americans, but as members of the logistics operations and members of the Lithuanian army eventually. In conclusion with all of this, I gained a valuable insight to the culture of Lithuanian military and how they operated on a day-to-day basis, at the deployed location anyway. I started my trip as a fish out of water, but soon became accustomed to military lifestyle with the Lithuanian camp. I worried myself, feared for myself, and grew and adapted to circumstances I was not related to. This had been a great opportunity to expand my cultural awareness of other communities and cultures within the world. I really hope that somehow, someday, everybody gets to experience a similar situation, to put themselves in such a situation, to be able to experience this. I honestly believe that this has made me a better person overall, within my worldwide experience. And with that, I thank you for your time and hope you've enjoyed my speech. Thank you.